Assalamu alaikum. And thank you, Ahmed, for that wonderful introduction, informing the audience about our partnership with Mala. Again, this is episode number 7 for a daily dose, providing medicinal motivation by Muslims in sports. And tonight we have a very special guest, the legendary, phenomenal Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and welcome our brother, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, to the program.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It's a pleasure to be here, man.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful, man. Good to see you as always.
Yes, sir.
Likewise. Yeah, so in the midst of everything that's going on, we just we're grateful and honored that you are part of the program tonight. And we know that you have a very inspiring story, so we'll just jump right in it. So tell us about what it was like growing up in Gulfport, Mississippi. Talk about the environment and how you were raised.
Oh man, growing up in the South, man, in particular Gulfport. When you're young, you don't necessarily in early off know how tough it is. Because the neighborhood that you're growing up in, everybody's in pretty much the same situation. But when you get a little older, and when I say older, I mean like late elementary school, junior high school, you start noticing there's a drastic difference in the way you live as opposed to people across the track in the nice neighborhoods. And for me, man, growing up in that environment, surrounded by, and I talk about this a lot, surrounded, and it comes with the territory. When you're growing up in ghettos where you see the prostitution, you see the drugs, you see the poverty, and so that was tough. Also having a single parent for me, not having a father, that has its challenges. My mother having an 8th grade education, and even though she provided for us and she did a wonderful job under the circumstances, there's it inhibits you in many ways. And so at an early age, man, because you don't grow up in a house where you're constantly fed the diet of reading books and thinking, critical thinking and problem solving. There's a tendency, and it happened for me, to feel in some ways that you're inadequate and you don't have the confidence when it comes to academics. And so I suffered in that way. Just didn't have the confidence when it came to school and feeling that I had a future when it came to academics. So, those are some of the things, man. And just growing up, not having, not having a lot of what you see other people have. And, there's blessings in that too, but those are some of the things, man, that I experienced and the challenges that I had, and also being misdiagnosed for years, having a neurological disorder that affects you and that challenges you tremendously. So alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so those issues, so you're looking at, impoverished situation, you're talking about growing up in the ghetto, and then on top of that, you're talking about a neurological situation with Tourette's Syndrome. So talk about the effects of Tourette's Syndrome and what kind of challenges those pose for you.
Well, having Tourette's, man, is the way I normally frame it. It's like your mind and your body on 2 different wavelengths. And, you speak about obsessive compulsive behavior. Like if I touch something and it doesn't feel right, I have to continue to touch it until my mind and my body are on the same page. And Tourette's involves every aspect of your life, even educationally. Like you're in class and you're trying to listen to the teacher, but you're trying to stay still. And it's hard to learn in situations like that. And you don't want to make any drastic movements because especially at that age, whether you're in elementary, junior, and high school, man, people will rib on you in a heartbeat, right? So you're trying to listen but stay still, and it's almost impossible to really learn. And then when you're reading stuff, if it doesn't roll off your lips correctly, right? You have to read it again and say it rolls off of your lips the way you want it, but it doesn't roll off your mind the way you want it. You got to read it again. Say those two things are there, but then after you got those down, you don't comprehend it. So it's like you can't go forward until all those pieces are there, but it may take you 10, 15 minutes just to read a page, and it gets frustrating. And sometimes you just want to put the book down, man. I'm tired, right? And it's exhausting. And so even with basketball and just getting dressed to leave the house may take 40 something minutes, man, because you're putting your clothes on, taking it off. So a huge part of your day is trying to manage just being normal and getting through the day, while you're also trying to focus on, let me try to be great in basketball. Let me not be a total nutcase or, unintelligent in school, right? And you trying to, as you're pursuing these goals, manage all of that that's going on top of the environment that you're living in and the issues that's going on with your head, whether it's not having a father, was, living in, the conditions that you're living in, not having whether food to eat or, adequate clothing or the type of clothes that you would like to have, all of those things, man, that comes with it. Very challenging.
So I would venture to believe it posed a lot of emotional issues, a lot of emotional roller coasters. How did you channel that emotion, or where did you direct those emotions that you had, the anger, the frustration, with all of the challenges that were surrounding you? How did you channel those emotions, or where did you channel those emotions to?
Man, I was blessed to come out of, I'm a Muslim now. I'm very grateful and thankful of that, but I didn't grow up as a Muslim. I grew up in a Christian background, and the people that I credit for giving me initially the mind to think about something greater than yourself, a God above all, is my grandmother, my uncle, and my aunt. They were very religious, and I would sit in their little classes at the house, and then they would take me to the church. And that's one thing as a child, man, that I was always mindful of, even though when I was going through those struggles, in Islam we call it dhikr, the remembrance of Allah. But I would walk the streets, man, and I remember being told that for every weakness, God gives you a strength, and He gives you that strength to overcome that weakness. So even from elementary school to junior, all throughout my life, even now, I constantly recall, and I'm constantly walking the street, man. I'm constantly, calling on God to protect me, calling on God to give me strength, calling on God to bless me, not for necessarily. And then I would always redirect that energy out, where sometimes when we're just constantly thinking of ourselves and it's all about us, man, it can be overwhelming. And there's a saying that if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. So even as a child, man, I was taught by my grandmother and my aunt and my uncle that when you pray, pray for yourself, okay. But he said, pray for others more than you pray for yourself. So even at that age, I would kind of sometimes take the attention off of me and think of someone else, right? Think of some other condition. And for me, it helped. But then also focusing on my goals and my craft, and not just focusing on the problem. Okay, what's the solution, right? For every, I was told for every weakness, God gives you that strength. So, okay, maybe He's giving me basketball. Maybe He's giving me this to overcome, in a sense, to deal with that. So that's the way my mind has constantly been working from those elementary years to now, because we can always focus on the negative, right? And I'm always thinking, okay, you hit me with this. Like we have this saying, right, that He doesn't give you a burden you can't bear. So if I'm still living, I'm still breathing, then I must be able to bear it. I just got to figure out how to bear it. And so my mind is always trying to figure out, okay, what's the solution? How can I come out of this? How can I make this better? Blows that don't break your back, strengthen it, right? This is meant to elevate me and make me stronger, right? And so this is the way my mind works. And this is how I get out of it and make it happen.
So going back to the environment in Gulfport, what were some of the visual images that you remember that stuck with you whether it's, you know, a local store that, you know, you remember seeing a person there, or was it the basketball court? What are some of the images that kind of help you shape your upbringing, whether positive or negative?
Man, a lot. You know, growing up on an alley street, not paved, growing up in a, you know, pretty much old, decrepit kind of, you know, house. You know, they even have images, you know, like now you have the nice drywall. We had the little, the 1x4s or whatever, and they had lines in them, like air is coming all through. Of course, the basketball courts, and each one was different. Had a different layout. Some were better than the others, depending. Just the streets, coming up the streets, in the street across from me. I mean, the street right over from me. That was the street where you had the Bubba Hicks, and you had all the lounges and the bars, and you would see things. The house across from me, right next to it, was a motel. And in that motel was where a lot of also the prostitutes would go. You know, people would go into. Next to my left was the church house, right? Where I would, like literally is a rock throw away. You had the grocery store that I would go to constantly, and my mother would send me to. And but I remember people. You know, I remember a lot of people, not so good and good in my life too. You know, I remember one day I was coming up the street, and there was this guy. He was known as the neighborhood drunk, and his name was Bozo. And one day, man, I was so terrified. I mean, because he caught me one day, and you know, he would walk the street, usually wouldn't say anything to you, but one day he's like, "Boy, come here," and you know, he scared me. You know how you can be so scared you can't run, right? And you end up going to what scares you. And he ended up grabbing me, and by the grace of mercy of Allah, that could have been a situation where I didn't know his intentions, but I remember him grabbing me, and he took me in his house. "Sit down, boy," you know, and he was drunk, and he went into the kitchen, and I'm like, whoa, what's, you know, I'm terrified, and he ends up coming out and giving me something to eat, you know, and talking to me, right? And so these are like, and I know it's not necessarily, but these are type of things that growing up, some of which I remember, the good, the bad, the challenging, the, you know, the weird things that happen, man, but it makes you look at people differently. You know, like even that scenario, there's a tendency when you look at a person like that and they're carrying this attitude, like they're mad at the world, right, or whatever, you know, a person would assume that, man, that guy grabbed you, he's getting ready to do you harm. And so it makes you think, it puts me in line of in the Quran when Allah talks about Moses and Khidr, right? And how not everything is what it seems all the time, right? And so even that incident, as a child, you begin to think differently when you see people. Like, looking at him, I wouldn't have expected, and the way he was acting, I wouldn't have expected him to treat me that way. I would have expected him to cause me harm. But it was the opposite. So it teaches you not to be so quick to judge people, right? Even at that age. So, you know, and alhamdulillah, man, I can go on and on, but I don't want to monopolize it.
No. You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. So take us to the basketball part early on growing up, you know, how you were able to train, how you were able to develop and work on your craft in the midst of everything that was going on.
Man, I had, when it came to basketball, man, a part of that drive was, I had to do something. You know, you as a child, you don't see where academics is your future. Like, the vision that you have for yourself of being wealthy and being able to take care of your family, the way you see it, you don't see education being that tool. And I knew that I had to come up with something. But I also knew that I love sports, right? And that a lot of it, whether it was basketball, whether it's playing sandlot baseball, football, it came pretty natural to me. I knew I had athletic ability. And so I flirted with those sports. And then eventually basketball was the one that just clicked more than anything. And so at like 9, 10 years old, I made the decision. And it wasn't like iffy. It was like, no, it was a hardcore decision that, man, I want to be the best and I want to make it to the NBA. And not just make it, but I want to make some noise. And so I was determined to wake up, man. I started waking up like 4 or so, close to 5 in the morning, because my mother had to be to work at 5. And I'd made up my mind that this is going to be my habit, that I'm going to wake up, even if it kills me, and I'm going to work like I've never worked before. And I'm going to challenge myself. And I would do that, man, every morning. Rain, no matter how cold it was, thunder and lightning. It didn't matter. I was so determined. And so I used to go to, there was 3 basketball courts, and there were 2 that I favored. One we called the New Center, and one was 2nd Street Park. And 2nd Street Park was closer to the beach, and that was in the white neighborhood. So, you know, the houses and the yard, all of that looked a whole lot better. So that's the one I was at the most, because it correlated to not just what I wanted to do, but also I'm looking at homes that were better than mine. And you could see, at the same time you're training, you're looking at the vision, right? And so, man, I would condition myself. I would play games with myself, man. I would imagine 2, 3 invisible people playing against me. And wherever they were like always a fingertip away from touching the ball, you know, from blocking my shot. And I'm always trying to escape my, you know, create space with these invisible people. Because at that age, I'm like, if I can create space, you know, the magic is crazy, but if I can create space with my imagination, with these invisible people that's on me like this, a human being can't stay with you like your imagination can. They don't have a chance. And I would get to the point where I'm envisioning them hitting me and leaning on me and fouling me, and I'm trying to get the shot up. And I would do this day in and day out. And I'm talking about hours and hours of practice, near-death experiences. I wanted it that bad where, and I don't say this because it sounds good. I mean, I feel it now. If you ask me, would you want to go back with what I know now of how education can and information can really take you places beyond just basketball? How many near-death experiences that I had, man, I thought I was going down that basketball court because I wanted it so bad, but at the same time, I felt that this was the only shot I had to make it. I don't know if I want to go back and go through that again. Even though I know how it's benefited me, I'm like, man, because it was scary. And so you're waking up every morning, and then you're fighting this Tourettes Syndrome, right? 45 minutes or so before, or an hour before you get out the house, just to get to the basketball court. It may take another 45 minutes because as you're doing moves on the way, if it don't feel right, you got to do it over again. If you mess up a certain number of times, you got to back up, 10 steps, and you got to do it. And so that may take you time. Then when you get there, you got to go through these drills. You got to imagine the 2, 3 invisible people. They're hanging on you, and you're pushing yourself. And Tourette's is telling you when you finally finish the hour and a half training that you're exhausted about it, saying, well, you can't leave now. You got to play me, and you got to be full speed. And if you slow down, it don't count. And you got to make 10 shots, and all of them have to be nets with being full speed. This is what almost killed me every day. But the determination to make it, again, as we talked about before, thinking of something bigger than yourself. Like, man, my mother and my brothers drove. I mean, like, man, I want to get my mom out the ghetto. I want to be in a position to help people someday. This woke me up way more. Like, literally 90-something% of the time, woke me up way more than me thinking about being personally great. Literally, though, if it was just about me being personally great, I wouldn't have woke up. This is just me personally. All of those mornings, day in and day out, to do that. Because it's like, if I make it, I make it. If I don't, I don't. There's nobody counting on you. You're not forcibly putting people on your shoulder. It's like, even though I was young and, okay, my mother was providing the best she could, I didn't have to do that. But I forcefully put those pressures on me. Like, no, this is on my shoulders, right? And I got to do this for my mom. I got to do this for my brothers. I got to do this. And this is my mindset at that age. I forced that on my shoulders. And that got me up, man. And those are some of the things that got me going.
Yeah, so all of that hard work and determination and that resolve led you to an outstanding high school basketball career, McDonald's All-American, averaging 29.2 points, and then you go over to LSU. What made you decide on LSU?
You know, man, alhamdulillah, I was being recruited by a lot of colleges. A lot of them are guaranteeing you, promising you things. Right? You come here, you're going to play right away, right? And even at that age, man, it just, you know, people start filling you in on how the recruiting goes. And that just didn't resonate with me a lot. Yeah, I didn't say that that was my goal too, to get in and be an immediate impact. You know, I think mostly all college players would probably say that would be their goal. But it was something about it that just didn't sit well with me. You know what I'm saying to myself, we don't know what tomorrow gonna bring. We don't know what the next second gonna bring. How do you know that I'm going to, how can you promise me that? You know, you don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. You don't know if the next guy, you know, another guy you're recruiting is gonna outplay me. So that didn't sit well. LSU, man, came, they talked to me, and one guy in particular, more than any, was Craig Cars, and we're still in contact today. He was the assistant at the time, and we probably spoke, man, for 1,000 hours, and probably 95% of those hours we spoke had nothing to do with basketball. And when LSU came to me, they didn't promise me, you come here, you're gonna play right away. They said, we have a young guy named Fess Irving, right? He was a McDonald's All-American. He was a first-team freshman last year. You'll be competing. And out of all the schools, pretty much, they were the only ones that didn't say, when you come, they say, if you deserve the spot. Now, I'm #1 guard coming out of the nation. You know, but at the same time, there's still some old school about me. Like, I don't like that unhealthy favoritism. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to earn it. You know, just like I don't want, because if you favor me, you know, who's to say? I don't know. Maybe you don't. You're just telling me that when I get to the school, you know, it's about favoritism. It's not about who can produce. And when they told me that, man, I processed it quick. I'm like, wow, I'm #1 guard in the nation. They're not arrogant with it. They're just saying, hey, if you deserve to play, you'll play. But this is what we have, and we love to have you. And I shook their hand. But after talking to Craig Cars for all those hours, I ended up telling him, I said, man, my mind is made up. I'm going to come to LSU. And that's what drove me to LSU. Just that simple fact alone. You know, because I didn't want to be in a situation where, you know, that's unhealthy favoritism exists, because it's all around us, right? I just want to earn it, man. Just be fair across the board. And it just happened that I went, and one thing led to another, man. And by the grace and mercy of Allah, man, I was able to do some great things while I was there.
Yeah. Talk about great things. I mean, as soon as you hit on the scene, you know, 48 points, 53 points, Sports Illustrated. Yeah. So talk to us about, you know, just the dynamic of, you know, you're leaving Gulfport, you come up to LSU, and then you're getting national attention, front cover of Sports Illustrated, you know, game of the weeks, all of those different things, you know, coming from, you know, the ghettos, impoverished situations. Talk to us about that, you know, that dynamic now.
Man, I don't think anybody expected that. I mean, I think they probably felt that, well, you know, I think he's going to be a decent player, because we had a lot of players that came out of Mississippi that were very good players and ended up going to college, and you didn't necessarily hear from them like that anymore. But I'm losing my frame of thought. You know, that happens to me sometimes. What was the question you just?
just really just talking about, you know, the dynamics of coming from Gulfport, coming from abject poverty, and now you're on front cover of Sports Illustrated, all over the, you know, the sports media, just that dynamic and dealing with that.
Man, it was scary out because, you know, when you're coming out of that environment, you don't see a whole lot of examples or hear a whole lot of examples of people making it on that level. You hear things like, well, you too small, right? This happened to such and such. You have the positivity. I don't want to make it sound like every person I can count it was that way. Because I had people like Pop and Boo Cooper, you know, Spencer, you know, Mitchell Quince, you know, Percy. These were people that constantly gave you the positives along with your family. But you hear a lot of negative too, right? Because people don't see those great examples, right, of people making it, man. And so it was scary because you also, some of that seeps into you, even though you have dreams and you're thinking big and you have moments of being positive and having confidence, still there's this, you know, you don't see these examples. So in the back of your mind, you're hoping and praying for it, but you're also like, you're not, a part of you is not counting on it. Like seriously counting. It's a since you talk about dynamics, it's a crazy dynamic how the mind works. And there's so many influences that, and I talk about this a lot, and I know you've heard it. Like even the movies we watch, they give you that, like the Sanford and Sons and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like almost every time they try, it seems like they're getting ready to make it out the ghetto, something happened to kick them right back in the ghetto. So in your mind, you're thinking, well, this is going well now, but this is too good to be true. It ain't gonna last. I'm gonna enjoy it while it's here. You don't see necessarily most of the times longevity. No, I can do this, but no, I can be great until I die, right? This ain't no Sanford and Son episode, right? You know, this ain't no Good Times, you know? So it was scary in that sense, the dynamic that I'm going through these things. In this first year, I'm like, okay, this first game I had 13 and 7, because this is what I told the journalist, man, if I can average 12, 13 and 7 assists throughout my college career, I think that'll be decent. So the second game I had 21, and I noticed something immediately after. I'm like, this is, but I was scared because I was still kind of like superstitious. I'm like, I don't want to say anything, man, because I don't want to jinx myself. But at that time, I'm like, this seems like I'm back in junior high and high school. It's easy. Right? And then that's when the coach pulled me to the side after that 21-point game. He said, we need you to score. And against, I think, Louisiana Tech, that third game, I had 48. And I'm talking about, it felt like an easy 48. And then before you knew it, just game after game. And I'm like, and I'm constantly in my mind waiting for, I'm like, okay, they're going to catch on. They're going to devise defenses to slow me down. But in light of that, I would also go in the gym and try to prepare for it, just in case. But it never came. And so I remember, man, being on the bus after Florida, that 53-point game, national televised game, and I'm literally on the bus crying, man. Like you would have thought I got news that my mother had been killed. And I'm crying so hard, man. I'm crying. I'm happy. I'm excited, you know, that I made it. Like that I was able to put up those numbers and do well these, first 5 games. But it was so overwhelming, you know, and I'm crying to myself because I'm like, man, this is too good to be true. Something's going to happen to me. I'm going to get hit by a car. The plane going to crash, because these things, from my experience growing up in my neighborhood, we don't hear about people doing this type of thing. And that's what scared me. And I'm like, man, you know, I was terrified. Like, something's going to happen to me. But at the same time, you still pushing it. You know, like something in you like, man, I got it. Man, forget if something going to happen, it's going to happen. You know, you constantly having conversations with yourself, because if you focus on that, you'll end up saying, man, I don't want to play no more. Because you become afraid of what success looks like, because you never really saw it on that level.
Mm.
And that's kind of what was going through my head during that period, man. But again, it's something amazing about when you focus on something bigger than you. Like even going through, man, this is too good to be true. Something gonna happen. I'm going to get hit by a car. Plane gonna crash. But then when you start thinking about, man, look, I've come too far, man. I got things I gotta do, man. I gotta take care of my mom. I gotta take care of my brother, man. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. It kind of takes your mind off of it, man. Trick that, man. I gotta go to work. I gotta put some work in. And that's what kept me in the ball game of not giving up, just having those views of wanting to do so much more and help people. And I think helping people for me is a huge thing, is because I know what it feels like, not to have nourishing meals all the time, not to have, proper clothes all the time, to worry about, if you can pay the gas or the water bill, you know what I mean? And being looked at because of your condition, like you less than, so I know what that feels like. And so for me, a lot of what drives me is those things. Even now at 51, when I wake up in the morning, I go train. I want to be healthy. Yeah, I want to be in shape. But it's really less to do with me and more to do with, okay, if you're in shape and if you're this, man, look how much you can do to try to be a benefit to somebody.
Mm.
So I don't know if I kind of went off on a tangent, man, but you know how we talk.
It's perfect. It's perfect. So with that, I want to segue into something that was a very pivotal moment, in your life. And that's, you're getting all the accolades, front cover, you're getting, you're scoring a bunch of points, but there's still something that's missing. And Dale Brown introduced you into, the autobiography of Malcolm X. So on the court, you have a certain image, you have a certain identity, but off the court, you still had this void. So talk about, him introducing you to the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Out of all the things that Dale Brown has done, recruiting me to come to LSU, putting me in the starting lineup, giving me the fluorescent light at LSU, giving me other material to look at and read, conversations, motivating, and all of that, man. The biggest thing, the most powerful thing, most critical thing, most important thing that he's ever done is give me that autobiography of Malcolm. That changed my life forever, man. Because you're talking about a young man that's still looking at himself, even at LSU, when a lot of the world were looking at me and they see this confident dude on the basketball court who's doing all of these things and skillful and, in their minds, right? And he's like, wow, he's confident and he's getting it done. To think possibly that transcends into other areas of my life, right? Like, okay, this just must be who he is. But I was the opposite when it came to the classroom. I was the opposite when it came to sitting down and people having, intellectual conversations to join in. I didn't think I was running from those things. And so I really looked down on myself in that capacity, man. After reading the autobiography of Malcolm, I'm like, wow. And I think every human being, man, we're attracted to information. School may not be for everybody, but I think being enlightened and being informed, everybody loves, information, right? That benefits them. And man, reading his story, man, just lit a fuse in me. I said, man, I want some of what he has, because I didn't have that. At the time, I didn't have his courage. I didn't have his ability to articulate, his desire to be informed and to study and to challenge himself in that way. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, I want what he has, as much of it as I can get, because I was that person that would see stuff and wouldn't always say anything about it. It didn't feel I really had a voice, because I put myself in a label of being a dumb jock athlete, right? And as the saying goes, don't let someone's perception of you become your reality, or don't let your negative perception of you become your reality. That's what I was doing. But after reading his book, man, I was like, man, I started thinking about a lot of things and analyzing a little bit more. And one thing led to another, because I was struggling at that time with being a Christian, you know, me personally. And I just would have questions that I would ask people, and they didn't give me a satisfactory answer. And I just felt empty after a while. I just felt I was just going through the motions. I was like a robot. Like, this is not really, I mean, there are things, of course, in it that I believe, but there were a lot of questions that confused me, that made things, you know, like problematic in my mind. And so after reading the autobiography, I go to Denver. And that first year, man, you know, I don't know if we're going to get to that, but I ended
go
up.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I ended up embracing. I was talking to this Catholic priest. I can't remember his name, man, to this day. But we became close, and he had a protege named Mark James. And because I was still searching, even though I read Malcolm, you've been practicing something for so long, you're scared to let it go just in case. Well, what if? And Islam came up in conversation. We rushed to the masjid. I'm going to skip some stuff because I know we don't have all day. But we came back with the Quran. He had one, I had one. I opened it up. He was across the table from me. Literally 2 to 3 pages later, man, I just knew. And I can't remember exactly what the words were, but I remember how it made me feel to this day, man. When I read it, I looked across the table at that brother, man, and I said, I don't know about you. My search is over. And I said it with conviction. I said, man, I'm going to be a Muslim. And so from that, I started going to the masjid, and there was this African-American brother who was a janitor there. And I would say he was my first teacher. You know what I mean? To start explaining things to me. I would sit with him, and he would talk to me. And I ended up that summer, I think in August, man, I decided to become a Muslim. And from there, man, my thirst for information and knowledge and trying to practice it is just, you know, escalated exponentially, you know what I mean? So, alhamdulillah.
So, you know, at this point in your life, you're dealing with, you know, kind of like 3 dynamics. You have your identity on the court. You found this journey through the autobiography of Malcolm X, and now you have Islam. So you're dealing with those 3 things. So how did you channel that into shaping your identity all the way up until the point where you took the stance that you took, that everybody knows you for?
Well, I mean, whatever you experience in life, man, I mean, as you already know, you can't negate it. And either those are the things that's going to benefit you, they're going to liberate you, you know, you're going to use them and become a better person as a result, or, you know, you're going to focus on other aspects of your life and negativity, and it's going to bring you down. So, you know, my upbringing, even the training, right? The things that you go through to become an NBA basketball player, to become successful at something, they're carryovers to everything that we do. You know, I use the story of Bruce Lee a lot, and he talked about running with this protege, trying to convince him to run miles. He finally convinces him, and then as they're running, he adds to the miles. The guy says, look, I don't, this is too much, Bruce, I'm gonna die. Bruce says, die. Go ahead and die then. The guy gets mad. He ends up finishing the race. At the end of the race, they ask him, why were you so mad? I mean, why was you so callous with this guy? He said, because once you give up on yourself, you know, there are carryovers to everything. You start giving up on a lot of other things, your family, your business, you know, your morality. So, you know, all of these things, my growing up, my training, discipline that it takes to wake up, fighting through pain, you know what I mean, challenging your mind to create scenarios to, you know, make your situation harder, people in your life that you're playing one-on-one against, you know, thinking it through, all of that, man, fighting through sickness, the issues that you're dealing with in your neighborhood, the things that you're seeing, the not having, the Tourettes Syndrome, all of those things help. I believe, you know, there's a guy in Dallas I met one time. I think he was somebody important in the government, prime, whatever it was, real high. He said, geniuses are created in times of crisis. You know, when you go through struggles and things, if you embrace them and you fight through them, they have a way of, man, elevating you in ways. So all of these things are the growing up, the Tourette's, the basketball, and the becoming a Muslim. Islam just, for me, it just put everything in perspective. It took all of those things, those challenges and those beautiful things, and it just shed light on it, you know, and magnified it in ways to where you can see, wow, there's really, you know, like you're not taught so much in school how to connect dots all the time, how to take this concept, and that intersectionality and make it a whole. But man, when I became a Muslim, you know, and reading what Allah tells me in the Quran and meeting great people, right? Not necessarily that you always agree with, but that challenge your thinking. All of these things, man, just ended up creating this individual in myself that, and even when I was a child, man, just like I said, just always trying to think of something bigger than yourself. So now that I look at it and I say, wow, you know, people say, well, he ended up becoming a Muslim and then he risked it all, right? By taking these positions. And I start looking back at my life. I'm like, you know, actually, when I think about it, how my mind worked, even though I didn't articulate it, I was almost always thinking about somebody else more than myself. You know, it seems like it seems like more of a natural transition. And really, when you look at the story of Musa and Gil, it's kind of like, wow. And it happens to all of us to some degree. And we don't make the connection. But, man, I was fortunate to meet a lot of people. And I don't know if you asked this, but I was fortunate to meet a lot of people after becoming Muslim, man. People would meet me on the road. And I'm talking about all types of people, teachers, professors, just students, just regular people, you know, working jobs, just wanting to meet me, man. And it was a habit of mine just to invite them up to the room. All they had to say at that time was Salaam Alaikum. And they have access. And then we just started having conversations. They started introducing me to material that I didn't know about. You know, all of these different authors, right, of books, the Noam Chomsky's, Howard Deans, Gore Vidal's, Randall Robinson's, Kawanja Kujuf. I mentioned them a lot. The Neil Postmans, and you know, the Maududis, the Sayyid Qutbs, right? And whether people are Shia, whether they're Sunni, I'm getting all of this, right? And I'm having to make sense of it, man. And it just, when you start reading this stuff, it does something to you. Especially when you have this mindset of wanting to be something more than just a basketball player and wanting to make a difference in life, wanting to help people, man. And Islam just like lit a fire in me, said, look, man, and the book of Malcolm, right? His examples, like, man, if my life ends and the only thing a person can remember of me is, man, he could light it up. He had a mean crossover, quick release. He could score on anybody. And that's all you remember. My life was wasted. You know, it was wasted. So.
No, man, it's the journey is so powerful when it's enlightened by knowledge and education. You know, coming from where you come from, not having the best education. Now you're armed with tools, and now you have the ability now to start giving back to others. So just, you know, in a nutshell, can you kind of briefly let everybody know the type of service that you've been involved in, whether it's public speaking, whether it's humanitarian work, or your work as an activist?
Well, yeah, you just said it. I mean, I've been fortunate, man, to have been doing a lot of public speaking lately. For the last, I think, I don't know, years go by so fast, maybe 4 or 5 years, give or take. You know, go to colleges, certain humanitarian organizations. Sometimes it's social activism or politics, depending. So I've definitely been doing that, trying to give back in that way too, by being a voice. But also I've been working with different humanitarian organizations. I've taken trips to different parts of the world, you know, dealing with people with, of course, abject poverty, who also providing water wells, right? Supporting education, supporting farmers, right? Doing those things. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. For me, that's life. you know how they say ball is life? Giving back is life. You know what I mean? It does something to the soul. And so, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Actually, I'm in the process of trying to finalize my nonprofit status, so that hopefully we could add to that and work with a lot of these organizations, right? That we've been supporting, and so that we can do more, because there's so much to do. So inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. So we're going to go into our Q&A session. We have tons of questions from what I understand. So we're going to try to do these in kind of a rapid fire status. So let's see. The first question is, what books are you currently reading?
Oh man, I'm reading this book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain: The Quest for a Moral Life. I'm going back over this book called Struggle on Their Minds: The Political Thought of African American Resistance by Alex Zamalin. Man, I just got through reading a book by Reza Aslan called No Other God But God, which was interesting. He posed a lot of questions that makes people uncomfortable, and I love books like that. I'm reading this book also called The Wisdom of a Psychopath, right? That was given to me by somebody. I'm constantly trying, man, just to read as much as I can. And I know I'm probably missing some stuff, but those are some of the ones I'm looking at right now.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. Let's see. I don't know what happened. I'm not seeing the questions anymore.
Yeah, well, I'll talk. I can run my mouth until. yeah. But no, man, it's, reading is. I was reading this book called The White Architects of a Black Education, man, and and I'm big on quotes, right? Trying to put things in context, and I remember Frederick Douglass saying something, or writing something years ago, saying knowledge doesn't befit a man to be a slave, right? And to me, man, that was so powerful because of the power of information and knowledge. But I was reading in this book, The White Architects of a Black Education. I can't remember the author's name, but he said that, in order for colonialism to be justified, right, and albeit, imperialism and all of that, man, when he made this quote, it was beautiful, but it was so true. He said they use the textbook as often as the bullet, right? And man, when I read that, it just, again, that was one of those quotes too that even lit a fire in you more, that the power of knowledge and information, that it could either liberate or it can enslave you. And so that's why I'm big on reading. I remember a dude telling me once, he said, readers are our leaders, right? Or our leaders, are readers. But I love it, man. I love it. But not just for reading's sake. Read things and then you try to use that knowledge and apply it. Right? Yes. MashaAllah.
So the next question is, how did you prepare for Ramadan while you were playing basketball?
Oh man. Everybody's different, but for me, I drank more. Because you run so much and you play so much, you're going to get dehydrated regardless. But I didn't want to be like super dehydrated. So for me, in terms of the eating aspect of it and drinking aspect of it, I would wake up and make sure that I had a lot of liquids in me, and I would eat less because I didn't want to get that dehydration. As far as the other aspects, man, we know how special of a month it is for us. And so it's just finding the time to read as much as you can, to contemplate as much as you can, especially as they say on these last 10 nights, right? And so I would literally, and the beauty back then of the beauty of playing in the NBA is that after practice, right, you pretty much have nothing but time on your hands, right? So I would really spend it, just like now, spend it trying to read, trying to reflect, trying to pray a lot. And then just talking to people, sharing information, learning as much as I can. And that hasn't changed. Mashallah. And, but also I try not to be that person. I think we do ourselves a disservice, and it's really not fasting. And people can have their arguments, but I don't think I think we when we change the night and the day, where we sleep all day and then we stay up all night, it defeats the purpose of fasting. Like we become bears in hibernation, right? And that's something that I was fortunate when I became a Muslim, that I was told from the door, like whatever your lifestyle is, you continue to do that. You don't change it now to where now, oh, we're fasting, so I'm gonna sleep all day and I'm gonna stay up all night, right? No, if part of the fast is you got to go through the struggle, right? The intensity of it. And those are the things that build you, that makes you stronger. And so I try to always make sure, man, that no, I'm doing something. Of course, you're gonna have moments when you nap, right? But you try not to change anything. If anything, you're trying to add to what you do. Do more of it during that month. And that's always been my mindset. And I've just been fortunate, man, that for this month, for me, it's like my energy level increases, my focus increases. And you would think just the opposite, man. How can you work out? But it's amazing. It's like I got more energy. I'm lighter. I can go longer. And so I look forward to it every year. And even when it's not Ramadan, there's something special. I don't know if it's more psychological, but it's something special about fasting in Ramadan as opposed to fasting, voluntarily, Mondays or Thursday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, throughout the year. And I still do it because I know what the benefits are, but it's something unique and special about this month that just feels different.
Yeah. So this is a quick one. One question is, are you still in contact with Tariq Abdul-Wahad, one of your former teammates?
We have each other's number. We don't talk all the time, but we do hit each other up every now and then. The last time I saw him, I think, was a couple of years or so. It may be more than that. I'm bad with timing like that. At I think at a Muslim convention in Detroit. But I think he's definitely doing well. I think he's in Fresno still. But yeah, we don't keep in touch consistently. But when we do, it's like it's like we haven't skipped a beat.
Okay. And let's see, this one, I guess there was a second part question to the one about fasting. Did you fast during on game days? Did you fast on game days?
I fasted every day. Yeah. Game days, non-game days. There was no difference for me. Yeah. When I traveled, when I was at home, I kept the fast.
Okay. All right. So I'm not seeing any more questions. Let me see before we close out. While I'm looking for that, any closing remarks that you want to give, any advice, recommendations, or anything like that?
Man, I just, for one, just want to wish everybody, man, a blessed Ramadan, and hope that they are getting the most out of it, and that this is something that could carry them out throughout the year into the next Ramadan. And, if I was to say anything, man, is it kind of reminds me, I'm thinking about, man, I love his quote, George Washington Carver, no one has the right to come into this world and go out of it without leaving behind distinct and legitimate reasons for having passed through it. So we all should be striving. I think one of the greatest things that one can do is being of service, to humanity. And so I would just encourage everybody to, inshallah, to think down those lines. And I think when you start doing that, you'll experience how gratifying it is and how happy it makes you, and how better it makes the world around you, right? It more so brings about social solidarity, right? It increases that even more. So alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so the last question, I just want to get it in real quick, and it's kind of a segue to exactly what you were talking about, just adding to what you just said. How can we work to make society a more equal place?
Oh, wow. That's a broad one. I think man, That's a heavy one. My mind is all over the place. But right now, the first two things that come to my mind, man, and it's a generic response, but it's still true. We have to educate ourselves on so many things, you know, not be one dimensional. There's so many people with different interests, right? And sometimes we have to try to understand what makes people tick, right? Why they're interested in what they're interested in. Show an interest when we can of what people are interested in. But also, I think, man, again, being of service. You know, there's so many people in need. Whether you're talking about those who suffer poverty, whether you're talking to people who are suffering abuse, whether you're talking about orphans. And I think when we extend support to people, right? And like the saying goes, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And as another saying goes, that the goal in life is to find your gift. The purpose in life is to give it away, right? Because we can't take any of this stuff with us. As they say, only your good deeds you can take with you. I think those, just on the surface of it, those are a couple of things that we can begin with. And really, man, associating with people that think down similar lines as you. There's a book called Invisible Influences. There's a book by Paul Tuff called How Children Succeed. And I think they go hand in hand with each other. Allah tells us, be in the company of the righteous, right? Because, you know, when you're in company of certain groups of people, I think it has a way of rubbing off on you. And we're influenced by these positive reinforcements. And so those are just some things, man, that just generally speaking, I think we can do to begin the process of making the world a better place. Yeah.
I know we're out of time, but this is something that we'll be remiss if we couldn't get this in. Just if you could talk about Colin Kaepernick, and, you know, I know it's not doing enough justice to kind of rush you with this one, but the subject of Colin Kaepernick is it's been a big question, and some of the questions that came in was about Colin. So just speak whatever you feel on Colin for the next few seconds that we have here.
Colin is an inspiration, man. He made a big step, and not only did he make a big step in doing what he did, trying to shed light in his position with his platform on the racial inequalities, the police brutality that exists, but also he backed it up with getting out there and putting his resources into a lot of different projects, whether it's Know Your Rights campaign, whether it's prisoner situation, whether it's the food, he was sending to Somalia, and he's constantly doing things. So he's definitely an inspiration for me when I hear stories like that about people in that position that take such a risk, and we all do, but, you know, he definitely took a major risk. Certainly an inspiration, you know, I love him for it, and will forever appreciate him for the stand that not only he took, but that he's still taking.
Well, we appreciate it, man. We're out of time. Man, we're grateful and honored that you can be on the show. We have to do it again.
Inshallah.
And may Allah continue to bless you and your family with the rest of the Ramadan and throughout the rest of your life. You've been an inspiration to many. We look towards you for motivation and inspiration. So we appreciate you being a part of the show, and we thank you, man. That's.
Well, whatever you've asked, whatever you said about me, and you want for me, I want more for you, and the Ummah. Mashallah, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, man. And
Thank you.
go ahead. All right, thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.